All right, kids. So right here we're looking at the APUSH period 1890 to 1909 and the empire and expansion and looking at US imperialism. Here are some of the important ideas. 1790 territorial expansion. In 1893, Frederick Turner says, "Nah, the frontier's closed. We're done. We filled it all up." In the 1890s, the United States becomes an absolute global power. Now, what were our motives for imperialism? Economic, yeah. Political, definitely. Strategic, absolutely. We needed to acquire some bases. Remember, Alfred T. Mahan, in his book, The Influence of Sea Power. The need to have a powerful navy is important for any government to be a power. You gotta have it. Build the Panama Canal. Now, what were our motives? What were the motives for building the Panama Canal? Was it simply to help out the people of Panama? No, we are not that altruistic and we never have been. We do things with our own agendas. Now, the idea of the white man's burden. Think about that phrase, white man's burden. How often have we heard that? In fact, there's a movie starring Samuel Jackson and John Travolta. Y'all have probably never seen it because you're babies. But the phrase white man's burden, what does it mean? Think about it. Darwin's concepts applied to international affairs, social Darwinism, political Darwinism. Man, that Darwin, he's got staying power. The Reverend Josiah Strong in his Our Country, stating that the Anglo-Saxon civilization is superior and that it is our job. We have to colonize other lands to spread our superior civilization. Case in point, Hawaii. In the 1820s, the American missionaries go to the islands to convert the natives to Christianity. And American sugar and pineapple planters begin buying up land. Enter the Dole family. Now in 1887, the United States signs a treaty and establishes Pearl Harbor as a naval base. Now various interests in the U.S. want to annex Hawaii. Some don't. Now, the Queen Liliuokalani, advocated that Hawaii should be controlled by the Hawaiian people. Now, this spurred on a revolt orchestrated by, you guessed it, the white plantation owners, most notably the Dole family, and they overthrew the Queen in 1893. Grover Cleveland rejects annexation. William McKinley says, come on, let's annex in 1898. Why? Because it gave them a Pacific naval stronghold. It gave them a shipping port. It gave them naval bases in the Pacific so that they could strengthen their relationships with China and Japan and the Far East. Now, our next case, Cuba. Now, Cuba was still controlled by Spain, and revolts against Spanish rule were coming more and more often, and the Spanish sent General Butcher Weyler to stop the rebellion in Cuba. Now here we see an instance of reconcentration camps, and Cubans die of starvation and disease. Why does the United States care? Because the United States is heavily invested in sugar plantations. Millions and millions come from sugar plantation investments. So we as Americans, we take pity on the we Cuban people, and we have this instance of yellow journalism where the affairs, the exploits, the occurrences are exaggerated greatly. They're sensationalized to make people see just exactly why we need to be involved. Has anybody ever seen a commercial for the ASPCA where they show the absolute worst possible conditions you could ever think of for animals? Who doesn't like to see, who hates to see animals in pain? Nobody, unless you're a psychopath. So it moves you to take action. Now, in the Delome letter, a Spanish official disrespects President McKinley. Now, we just can't have that, can we? So what happens next? The Maine explodes in Havana Harbor. Do we know why it explodes? No, we don't. It doesn't matter because it explodes. It's an American ship and it explodes in a foreign port. So the Spanish-American War begins. The Yellow Press, they blame Spain for the destruction of the battleship Maine. And who wouldn't? They're the easy target. They control the colony and they don't like us being there. So why wouldn't we blame them? Now in April 1898, the United States declares war officially against Spain. Now it's the US, Cuba, and the Philippines versus Spain. Why the Philippines? Why the Philippines? Oh, I don't know. I guess we'll have to figure that part out. I'm guessing that the Philippines is a Spanish colony still. Just a guess. I don't know. Now, the Teller Amendment says the U.S. have no intention of taking over Cuba. We're not. We're just trying to help out. We're not going to take over Cuba. We should have, but we didn't. Now, Cuba will control their own government. That's the Teller Amendment. Great job, Mr. Teller. Now, the Secretary of State, John Hay, he referred to the Spanish-American War as a splendid little war. A splendid, that sounds like an Irish saying. A splendid little war. No. So George Dewey crushes the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay. And Teddy Roosevelt, he led a volunteer regiment called the Rough Riders. Now, were the Rough Riders that big of a renegade influence and a military influence in the Spanish-American War? Probably not. But they were led by Teddy Roosevelt. And, I mean, the most important thing to come of all this? The creation of the teddy bear. Let's not forget that part. So, the war ends in August of 1898. And the Treaty of Paris sparked a debate in the United States. Now, why? Because the Treaty of Paris says that the United States acquires Guam, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Now, this is in direct contradiction to the Teller Amendment. So that's probably going to spark some controversy because we said we're not going to take Cuba, and then we do. And did Puerto Rico want to be annexed? Did they want to be part of the United States and under the United States' thumb? Did the Philippines? Did Guam? Guam and the Philippines serve a purpose for the United States. They're strategically placed in the Pacific Island, so they serve a purpose. But Puerto Rico, think about what purpose did Puerto Rico serve the United States? And why would we want them? And why would they not want us? So what are we going to do with our new territories? 2/3 majority is required to ratify a treaty. These are the debates in Congress. The Anti-Imperialist League opposed the annexation of the Philippines, and these members included massive, massive names like Andrew Carnegie and the leader of the American Federation of Labor, Samuel Gompers, the largest union in the country, and Mark Twain. Mark Twain's a Southern legend. I mean, if Mark Twain was against something, I might be against it too. Now, McKinley, he favored expansion, and Congress narrowly approves this treaty. And when we say narrowly in politics, that means that there was some behind-the-scenes dealing going on, and that's how we got everything passed that the president wanted. Cuba, the United States technically leaves in 1902. Remember the Teller Amendment. We're not going to take Cuba. We're not going to govern. Now, the Platt Amendment is passed in 1901. This says that the U.S. can intervene in order to restore peace and order, and that Cuba cannot sign a treaty with a foreign power that limited its independence. But the U.S. can maintain a naval base at Guantanamo Bay. Puerto Rico, the Foraker Act. Puerto Rico was granted a limited degree of popular government. They had self-rule, and they were granted U.S. citizenship in 1917. Now, the status of places such as Puerto Rico and the Philippines were kind of uncertain, and did the rights and protections under the United States Constitution follow the U.S. flag? Well, constitutional rights are not automatically extended to people in American territorial possessions. Now, recently, in American Samoa, American Samoans have been granted American citizenship. Does that mean that they receive constitutional rights? In the Philippines, Emilio Aguinaldo, the leader of the Filipino independence movement against Spain, and he fought alongside the U.S. against Spain. And after the Treaty of Paris, he thought the Philippines would receive its independence, and a brutal guerrilla war took place between the U.S. and the Philippines. The formal independence was not gained until 1946. Now, as I mentioned earlier, China. We needed access to get to China and the markets in China. The issue was other nations had carved China into spheres of influence. So these were areas that were exclusive, that had exclusive trading privileges. So Secretary of State John Hay, he announces the open door policy in 1899. And that means that all nations should have equal trading privileges in China. Now, what do other nations, are they going to care that John Hay says of the United States says we're all going to have trading rights to China when they already have exclusive trading rights to China? There might have been some laughter. Now, the Boxer Rebellion was an attempt to remove foreign influence of China. Now, that rebellion was put down by an international force, and enter President Theodore Roosevelt. McKinley is reelected in 1900. Roosevelt becomes president when McKinley is assassinated in 1901. Now, under Roosevelt, there's a dramatic rise in the power of the presidency, and Roosevelt will pursue an expansionist foreign policy. Everybody, we've heard this, speak softly and carry a big stick. All right, we will be right back to wrap this up with our next video. and we'll start